Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is a special screening of Freak Power, the Ballot or the Bomb. We have a lot of exciting guests joining us for the Q&A following the screening. We're going to run the whole film in the course of this webinar, and we'll be followed with a Q&A that'll include the two directors, Daniel Joseph Watkins and Ajax Phillips, plus producer Mimi Gitlin and associate producer Alex Buysse. Alex, you might want to jump in and give me a tip on how to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry about that in advance. And it's going to be moderated by Katherine Sweetman, whose father is in the film. She's an alumna from the School of Cinematic Arts, and I hope that you guys will enjoy the film and that it'll help motivate everyone to get out and vote tomorrow, if you haven't already. This is a presentation of Outside the Box Office together with SCA Votes, and as we all know, we've only got one more day to go. So enjoy the film. It'll just take me a moment to get started. If you want to ask questions during the Q&A, just make sure to place your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom field, and we'll call on people one-on-one to join us as panelists to ask your questions live. And I hope you guys will have a lot of great questions for our guests. So enjoy the show, and I'll see you in 94 minutes. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us now for the Q&A. We have a bunch of great filmmakers to welcome, including the directors, Daniel Joseph Watkins and Ajax Phillips, producer Mimi Gitlin, and associate producer and current SCA student Alex Buysse. And let's welcome our moderator, Katherine Sweetman, the daughter of Alex Sweetman, who you just met in the film. Welcome aboard, everyone. I'm going to turn this over to Katherine. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for doing this. And Ajax and DJ, I call you DJ, right? Thank you so much for this film. Such a joy to watch. As the daughter of Alex Sweetman, it was so incredibly moving to watch my 25-year-old father be involved with this story and this political campaign. Really grateful for this film. I also really appreciate you showing this lucid, brilliant, and serious side of Hunter S. Thompson. You know, beyond the caricature, beyond the Raoul Duke persona, beyond the Johnny Depp portrayal. This was an important look at this man. So I really wanted to thank you for this film. And DJ, as my father affectionately calls you, I know that you based this film on a book you made that Ajax also worked on with you. I know that you run a gallery in downtown Aspen, the Gonzo Art Gallery, that showcases Hunter's work and others. And so clearly you've been involved with Hunter Thompson for a long time. And my first question is, when did you decide to turn this passion into a film?
Just want to thank you also for moderating, and it's really nice to see everybody here. You know, the decision to make this project into a film really came down to the amazing elements that we had. Like you mentioned, I had written a book about Hunter's campaign, but even during that whole process, I never knew, for instance, about your father or his involvement. And once we saw the video, and we heard the audio, it really brought the story to life in a way that we could never have even imagined. And so it was almost kind of a responsibility once we had found this amazing kind of, you know, moment in American history. The responsibility then was on us to try to make this the most powerful documentary that we could. And thankfully, I met Mimi Gitlin, who really kind of connected us with a lot of the top talent in Hollywood. And she also was a real force in creatively crafting this story along with Ajax. And then, working with Buysse and others to really, do the story justice.
And Ajax, you are a very interesting artist and sculptor and writer in your own right. How did you come to be drawn to this Hunter Thompson story?
I think for me, I didn't know that Hunter had this more serious side to him until DJ started working on the Freak Power book. And then while we were working on the Freak Power book, I helped edit that book. I started reading everything that Hunter had written during this campaign, and I thought, wow, this is so amazing, and it's so relevant even now. Everything he's talking about sounds like he could be talking about 2020 instead of 1970. And then when we found the footage, when DJ found the footage in 2017, we were just, it was so magical to see that footage existed of this historic event that we had written this book about.
So tell us that story about finding the footage.
Well, a close friend of ours, Tony Preikel, who was the original editor on the project, he was the one who came across it, and it was just a can of 16 millimeter film, and it said Hunter Thompson for sheriff. And it was kind of cosmic that he was the one who found it because we had already written the book. And so he led me to Travis Fulton, who you can see him in the film a few times. He's the guy who would hit the stick, the audio recorder. And then, that led to searching the archives and then finding this really treasure trove. And one of the really cool things about this project cinematographically is how talented and beautiful the film that Bob Fulton was. He was kind of an avant-garde Harvard film professor and really didn't have any rules or, restraints in how he covered things, which was at some points incredibly frustrating because, for instance, Hunter would be talking and have this very, important thing to say, and Bob would be zooming in on kind of like the shine of the light on Hunter's forehead instead of, maybe getting a full frame shot. So it presented a lot of challenges, but it also gave us the ability to make a documentary that, it's not your run of the mill talking heads show.
It's not, it's incredible. Mimi, I want to get you into this conversation. You are an incredible, prolific producer, extraordinary films, narratives like Thelma and Louise, The Breadwinner, and then documentaries, The Hunting Ground, and these amazing films. I need to ask how you got involved in this project, and especially considering this is a debut feature for these filmmakers. How did you meet them, and what is your relationship to this Hunter Thompson story?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to be able to spend a lot of time I live in Los Angeles, but I have a home also in Aspen, so I get to go up there and spend time. And I was introduced to them through a good friend of both of ours in 2018, I think it was. And DJ was talking about this incredible footage he had found and wanting to do this documentary, and I've been talking to other filmmakers or other people that were potentially interested, and I felt in talking to them both, after looking at the book and reading the book, that they really knew the material better than anybody did. And I'm a big advocate of backing first-time filmmakers and people who have the knowledge to be able to tell a great story. And that's what it's really about. So you can arm people around, on the technical side, but you can't teach somebody how to tell a great story. Kelly Currier was her first script when she did Thelma and Louise. So I'm a big advocate of that. And so I said, you guys should direct this. And we shouldn't look for anybody else to direct it. And it turned out to be, I think absolutely the right thing to do. And I want to share, I do have a little prop here. I have DJ's Freak Power book,
Fantastic.
which everybody should get. And it's really amazing. And they did such an amazing job on that. And so they had all the goods to be able to. And also we cared about the same things about telling the story. We wanted to be a serious story about Hunter, tell this time in his life, that had not been told. I had met Hunter, in not back then, but, and then the different Hunter. I knew the Johnny Depp Hunter. And so this was revealing something that most people didn't know about,
Yeah, I definitely didn't. And we have Alex, the AP here, who is also a camera operator and a USC student. Hi, Alex.
Hey.
So tell us about what it was like. You were also there shooting. Were there any interesting, challenging moments during the shoot that may or may not have ended up on the film?
Oh, well, I know that for one of the shoots in particular, we were shooting unfortunately, we had to cut the interview of the current sheriff of Pitkin County, Joey DeSalvo. But we were shooting in DJ's apartment, this interview in downtown Aspen. And so I forgot who it was, but someone was just revving their motorcycle going around downtown, just in loops constantly. And I know that was a really good in the end for the sound guys, especially to work on. But I was mostly sequestered off into the corner during the shoots, either grabbing everybody lunch or trading off the video cards so that we could keep rolling all day and manage all the data.
And how did you get involved?
My dad is a big collector of Tom Benton's artwork. And my dad worked also on Hunter's funeral in 2005 or 6 when they infamously shot his ashes out of a cannon. And so I was, without knowing it really, I've been surrounded by all these political artworks around me my entire life. And it wasn't until, probably 2 or 3 years ago that I kind of started appreciating Hunter's work as a writer. And then I graduated high school, and like 2 or 3 days before I graduated, I think DJ heard from my dad because they have some business dealings that I was going to film school, and he offered me to work on the project, and that lasted through the summer and throughout my entire freshman year and my second summer as well.
We apologize to any of his professors.
You took him away.
Hey, it's the best school he ever got, right, Alex?
There were a couple on my for sure, but I managed to pull it together. So
I will mention also that how lucky we are to have had Alex's help. He really came through for us whenever we needed anything done whatsoever. So it's a real honor, and I think he's got a really great career ahead of him. So we're all excited to see what he comes up with next.
Someone get the big cane and drag him off stage here.
So how did you guys find other people to work on the film? How did you find all your interview subjects?
Well, I'll say the interview subjects came about just through our research, and actually meeting your father was one of the real high points of the whole project.
Your father was like my spirit animal for the film. I was like, Alex Sweetman, we have to find Alex Sweetman. He's so important. He's critical for this film. And then one day we were working in the office, and I was on Instagram just scrolling, and I saw somebody up at Anderson Ranch Art Center say, oh, Alex Sweetman's in the house. And I went and stalked him basically around Aspen all afternoon. And then finally he came over to the studio, and that's how we first met him.
And,
that's amazing.
And we showed the footage to Alex, and he blushed so hard looking at himself, 50 years prior. So there were, stories like that about how we got, to do all the
Different
interviews, and Bob Broaddus, the former sheriff, was instrumental. And then, from a technical and expertise level, Mimi really came in huge by connecting us with Rock, Paper, Scissors, with Angus Wall, Wills Nadarek, and then our sound engineer, Craig Mann, Academy Award winning sound, and then Gustavo to do the score, and then Gary Clark to do the end title song. So a lot of the credit goes to Mimi for really building this team around us that, complemented our vision, but also made it kind of as high quality as possible.
And it was easy to attract people because the subject matter was, something that everybody was really interested in. We had this incredible footage, and and particularly Gustavo Santillana, he's from Argentina, and he at 27, he was a long-haired musician, and all of his friends were always getting thrown in jail, and he left Argentina when he was like 27 to come to Los Angeles. So, and he's in his 60s now, and he, really related to this whole story. So he put his heart and soul into this. He composed the score, which we used the background of the trailer also, and then, going out to Paul Williams to write the lyrics for a song. Then us being able to attract Gary because he had met him at, Crossroads at a festival. And so he, Gary was, it's right. I think he and his family just had gotten over COVID, and he did the electric guitar and the vocals, and basically Gustavo played about 5 or 6 instruments, did vocals with Gary. And it just came actually out, Spotify Warner's released it on Friday, and we're working on some other kind of visual elements, music videos, promos and stuff to go along with it. So the song, I think, is really a fantastic song, and it's really a protest song,
That's amazing. So you have a bunch of people interested, and you have this footage that you found. It's still really hard to have interviews turn into a narrative structure. Can you guys talk about how that shaped in sort of post-production?
Yeah.
Or in production? Maybe
I'll say Alex transcribed everything, and vintage footage and modern interviews. Having those documents that are searchable was instrumental, but then a lot of the credit goes to Ajax for kind of creatively weaving things together.
If I can just jump in here, I think that in terms of actually building the narrative, I think basically what we realized had to happen was we did these huge timelines that covered 8 walls. They were just massive timelines of every single event that happened leading up to the campaign, everything that was going on in the United States during the campaign. And then we went through and kind of said, okay, some of this, at least some things that are on this timeline are going to definitely be in the film. And then we basically just made questions that went with every single event that was happening all over the United States while the campaign was happening. And so we asked, I think, between maybe 180 and 250 questions to each interviewee. So we had, that's why DJ is saying Alex was so instrumental, because we had such massive interviews that we honed down into the story.
And a lot of the work took place before we even picked up a camera, in terms of dissecting the vintage audio and the vintage video. Then we kind of knew, a few of the more important things, but then really it came down to the, being in the editing room and then having these documents to be able to search, okay, well, they're talking about the weathermen. Well, what in our interviews did people say about the weathermen? What in our vintage footage and audio did people say about the weathermen? And then, linking that together, and then just, incredible amounts of editing. We did the film, we made a rough cut of the film a year ago that Alex was really instrumental in putting together. And then that served as the basis for the subsequent work that was done in Hollywood.
And you've been working on the post for a long time. but it was a really conscious effort to release it now, right now.
Yeah. I mean, we may have, we realized that we probably gave up the opportunity to do more festival circuit stuff and to have more of a kind of traditional release if we had waited another 12 or 18 months. But we just felt strongly as a team that we really wanted to have this film out before the election.
Perfect.
Yeah, we would like to have it out 2 months before the election, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
So many parallels.
Right.
As you mentioned. I do want to ask Mimi, because we are a group of filmmakers, so for all of you, talk about how you make your first feature documentary and get it distributed. How can we as filmmakers do this ourselves?
Well, you just got to go out. You got to go out and do it. I mean, I think obviously you have the issue of funding for one thing. So if you're talking about, needing, depends how much money you're going to need, obviously. But I think the important thing for me in my experience with documentaries, and I find that a lot of times people don't do this in documentaries because I come first and foremost from the scripted side. Is to plan it out, like DJ said, to really understand what your story is and how you want to tell it, and what areas you want to focus on and what areas you want to reveal when, because you can do that in a documentary, because otherwise it takes forever, and then sometimes you won't get the things you need. I mean, DJ and Ajax were very well prepared because they asked all the questions they needed and everything. So we had all that material at our fingertips, We didn't have to go back in and do multiple interviews over again or anything like that. And, it can save a lot of time by almost scripting your documentary. But now that only works if the story is historical. Obviously, if the story is still unfolding, you just can't do that. You have to just shoot the story because the ending hasn't been written yet, And, I guess try to get some mentors and some people with a lot more experience than you involved as soon as possible to help you out. I don't know. Do you have any other specific questions? Because there's obviously a lot involved.
Yeah, and then really just having the passion. You
have to have passion. I mean,
passion.
Documentaries you have to have a passion to make a documentary because it's a lot of work. I mean, everything's a lot of work these days, but especially in documentaries. And so it's good to have a story you're really passionate about, that you really want to tell, that you really are deeply immersed in.
I want to ask you guys all what your plans are now for this project, for future projects.
Well, we definitely want to have this film to be kind of a slow burn. I think that the film is relevant and it's timeless in a lot of ways. And so we hope that this film, we just released it. So we're, hoping that, traction builds with the release. And then Alex and I have talked about a couple different ideas for possibly a short mini doc about Bob Broaddus, the former sheriff who played prominently in the film. And then we also have access to another trove of footage by Bob Fulton that he shot in 1969 and 1970 in East Africa and Kenya and Tanzania. And we're potentially looking at making another film with that, but for the time being, we're trying to enjoy this a little bit first.
Of course.
Take a break.
Yeah, I think
take a break for a while.
I think that the film, as time has gone on, when we're making it, with Black Lives Matter and all the things, and we could have never imagined that it would become even more and more relevant as we were making the film. And I think that that's going to continue after the election for a while. So I think these issues and these problems are not going to go away tomorrow. So I think that there's a conversation to be had after election, and I think we look to engage in that conversation and continue it so that into the next year. And I don't know if we're going to go for, potential nomination. I think Warner's is definitely going for a nomination on the song. And we just want to get as many people to be able to see it and engage in conversation. We've had incredible response all the way from, teenagers to 90-year-olds, respond to the film in a way, and it creates conversation in a good way, I think. So we hope to be able to continue that and build, a bigger and bigger audience sort of behind it for hopefully constructive and productive conversations.
Absolutely. Alex, what are you working on?
Well, like we said, I guess this upcoming winter, once my semester's over,
He puts his head in his hand.
yeah, we
I have
gotta
to go talk to DJ again.
we got a couple of weeks coming up here. Yeah, no, I'm excited to see what we can do with this Bob Broaddus project, because Bob is really this seminal figure in Pitkin County, and a local legend. And I think being able to tell his story in, being able to explore it more in an isolated format where he's the star of the show. I mean, DJ likes to, Bob's always around for gallery openings, and everyone loves Bob. So I think being able to tell his story as this freak power sheriff, the extension of Hunter Thompson's ideals, is really going to be fun. And then I've got whatever stupid video I've got, rattling around in the back of my mind at any point in time.
I am going to turn over to questions from students and from viewers in a moment. I just wanted to sincerely thank you so much for this film. So timely, so important. We'll of course keep telling everybody to vote. And is there anything else that you guys want to say before we turn it over to questions?
Write a review on Amazon or IMDb. Thanks. Yes.
And tell us where to find
or tweet, Instagram,
Yes.
anything. Just
For
put it out
the
there.
film bros out
for
there,
the song, for the film.
we're on Letterboxd. I got us on Letterboxd.
Oh yeah, we're on Rotten Tomatoes now. Yeah.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great meeting you.
It's so good to meet.
Love your dad.
So, Katherine, I'll jump in here to start calling on people in the audience. So for those of you who haven't been in one of our webinars before, we will call on you and then invite you over as a panelist so that you can actually ask your question with your camera on if you are comfortable with that. Otherwise, just turn on your mic. And I'm going to throw this over to Bill Yaris to kick it off. So let's get Bill on our side. And this just takes a second, and I'll queue up a running order of people that we'll call on so that everyone knows what the order is going to be. And just assuming that Bill can connect his mic, we should be good to go.
Here we go.
Hey,
Here
Bill.
we go.
Do you want to throw on your video, or are you not camera ready?
Oh, we're always camera ready here. How you doing?
Great.
I'm really wondering if the original filmmaker, now I've forgotten his name.
Bob Fulton.
Bob Fulton. Did Bob Fulton ever do anything with this footage, or did he just come upon a whole bunch of raw footage? Did he make a film of any kind? Together?
Yeah, so his original idea was after Hunter lost the election, I think they had thought about making it into a movie then. And for whatever reason, he brought the footage to Harvard, and for a short period of time was thinking about having his Harvard film class make a film from all these raw elements. And for whatever reason, they didn't follow through with that. But I will say that part of the reason why nothing ever happened with the footage was because it was so disparate, and there was so much audio and there was so much video, and not everything sunk together. We had a lot of video with no audio. We had a lot of audio with no video. So it wasn't like, oh my God, here's all this footage and it's perfectly ready to make a film. It was more like,
It was bulky.
it was a daunting endeavor to first develop some of it and then digitize it and then try to sync everything up. So I think that was part of the reason why he never did anything with it.
Bob did want to call his documentary, though, Stoned on Politics. If you did one.
Well, it looked like you had a ton of stuff, and I know from experience how daunting that can be. So congratulations. It was really, really well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
And to just add something onto that, Bob Fulton did a lot of other work outside of this film. I mean, some of the films that we used footage from some of his short, even more avant-garde montage films, where he does like a ton of these quick cuts, like super fast, 2 frames at a time, of all these natured shots that he took around Aspen in Colorado. And I think you can find that. He's got his own, the Robert Fulton film collection. You can see some of his films online.
And I'll also say that, tragically, Bob Fulton pioneered fixed wing videography, flying his plane around, and then tragically he died in a plane crash. And so that was one of the reasons. Also, the fact that nothing had ever been done with it was also because of the fact that he wasn't around to do anything with it.
Well, we were just talking about this, and we both really like those quick montages, and I'm happy to see that those were him.
Yeah. And you can see all of his films on, I think it's ref3.com, Robert E. Fulton Film Archive. And I believe a lot of his experimental films are online. And he's also kind of going through somewhat of a renaissance. A lot of European film festivals and a lot of film critics are really becoming aware of Fulton and also the important work that he did to kind of progress filmmaking. He worked with Stan Brakhage at the University of Colorado Boulder. And so these are, preeminent kind of avant-garde, amazing filmmakers that now are kind of for the first time getting their due credit.
Very cool.
Very cool. Very well done.
Thank you.
Okay, so before I call on Yichen next, I wanted to just read this thing that came in that wanted to be off camera. So the question is, any theories on what happened to the dynamite?
Oh man, that is
There's a little bit more to that story. That there's a little bit prelude to that we unfortunately cut from the film. But there's this whole story of this tacky, like Dutch development outside of Aspen, where it was like condos that were shaped like windmills or something like that.
The big fake windmill.
Yeah. And so somebody blew that up with actual dynamite. Not this dynamite that was stolen. I guess it was a separate set of earlier dynamite.
Before the election.
Yeah, before the election.
And
the year before the election.
Hunter had said that the CBI came to investigate this windmill detonation, and they said that so many people had been threatening to blow up the windmill that there was an incredible list of suspects, but that on the night that it actually blew, someone was in the Hotel Jerome and distributed 500 tabs of mescaline. And so when the CBI were interviewing people, most of the likely suspects weren't sure where they were at the magic hour. So the investigation was hopelessly complicated. But a more serious part of it is that in Aspen, there were bombings on the 4th of July, 1969. There were 4,000 bombings across the country in 1970.
Yeah, and to answer the question of where did the dynamite end up, we think, and people in the campaign think, that probably it was actually somebody from inside of Whitmire's campaign or even a federal agent who had taken it so that they could then implicate Hunter and Hunter's friends in this dynamite being stolen.
Wow. Okay, so Yichen, I'm going to move you over.
and then we'll go to Rick Forrest after that.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh,
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. So my question is directed to my dear friend Alex Buysse. I guess that's a two-part question. One, how do you feel about working on like a big project like this at your age?
I guess I was the little runt of the litter, huh?
Wild prodigy.
Yeah, the prodigy. It was a little intimidating at first because we had like on the days of shoots we had Carl and those guys that had come in that had worked on stuff before, and I was like, I had no idea what the hell they were doing setting up these shots for these interviews. But at the same time, after that, it was just kind of like this ragtag team, at least in Aspen, of like DJ, Ajax, Tony, and I, and then Mimi was off giving us 2 thumbs up, you know, from the sidelines there. And for a while there, it was just like this little ragtag team of this. We were working in this cabin that I had to get wired for internet. So it didn't end up being too bad, actually. Who's the closest? George, how old is George? One of our assistant editors, George Giannopoulos.
Older than you.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's probably in his 20s.
I will say that Alex consistently performed, and at the beginning, he was getting us lunch and coffees, and by the end of it, he was kind of making a lot of the calls.
sit down, DJ. Sit down, Ajax. Sit down. This is what we're gonna do.
The fact that he's laughing that much is an indication of how true that is. I was a bit of a technical liaison. You know, I know how to use Premiere whenever the guys in LA weren't listening to us too well. DJ and Ajax were kind of like, hey, we got this idea. Can you do a little rough draft edit in Premiere and then send it over to them so that we can check it out?
Nice. So my second question is, Alex, I know you do a little bit of stop motion animation. I know some people might also know you as, I believe what is it called, Alex?
Lone Clone is
the Lone Clone.
The Lone Clone is my Instagram handle. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, how does stop motion animation compare to creating a documentary at this kind of scale? Which do you prefer?
Well, let me tell you what, Ichan. Stop motion is a one-man game. It's you're there by yourself. You know, you're sitting there hours, back-breaking work, hunched over, blazing hot lights, and a very thankless task. And in this, I'm just a little fish in a big pond. So it's a world of difference. Let me tell you what. Thanks for your question.
Thank you for your answer.
This is the problem with being in a Q&A while you're also a student. Is that your fellow students like to ask you questions?
No, Alex is great.
Thanks, Ichan.
Toodles.
Okay, let me welcome over Rick Forrest.
Hello there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Can hear you.
Okay. Hey, I just wanted to know, in seeing the documentary, which I loved a lot, you saw a really different side of Hunter S. Thompson. You know, I'm used to the crazy Johnny Depp kind of Hunter S. Thompson that seems to kind of be going all over the place. But this showed a very real and down to earth and actually optimistic. And he seemed so broken at the end when he lost. Was that part of the transition toward the Johnny Depp style, or the kind of pessimistic kind of Hunter S. Thompson after that election, or what was the process that you saw?
Yeah. So shortly after Hunter lost, you know, the following spring he went to Las Vegas with Oscar Acosta, and that was turned into Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Initially an article for Rolling Stone that then turned into a book. And then shortly after that, he followed McGovern and Nixon around for the 72 campaign. And that became Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. And I think those two experiences, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, they really cemented Hunter's fame and talent, but also his, behavior,
Cynicism.
and his cynicism about what was happening. And I think the interesting line at the end of the film, when Ralph Steadman says, he was always looking for the American dream, but he couldn't find it because it didn't exist. And I think Hunter in his writing, the subline to Fear and Loathing is, the search for the American dream. And I think, it really is interesting to think about his cynicism later on versus the optimism of taking over your own government. One of the really critical things that we felt like we needed to do with this film is stay serious and keep Hunter serious, because he was so prescient and inspiring. But so many times there were so many decisions made where, hey, let's bring in a little bit of the craziness, because that's what people are going to want to see. People love Hunter. They love his antics. They love his shooting a fire extinguisher into the Woody Creek Tavern and scaring the shit out of people. But I think we made a conscious decision, and I think Ajax can also follow up on this, about, I think Hunter in a lot of ways became a victim of his own success and a victim of his own caricature of himself, and that he kind of used that as a cover or a shell. And that wasn't really who he was, but it's kind of what time and drugs and fame did to him.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Hunter was, he was an idealist. And I think it's very easy for idealists to end up feeling cynical. And I think that the McGovern-Nixon campaign in 72 certainly didn't do anything to make him less cynical. And then at that point, he became famous. Doonesbury started to happen. He was always very theatrical. You see this in the film, even when he's being serious, he has this sense of showmanship and this sense of theatricality. And that really appealed to people in Hollywood. And I think his caricature overtook him later in his life.
Thank you very much for the input. Did he become friends with the sheriff that followed the one that got disgraced? Did he become friends with him?
Oh, so Sheriff Whitmire was in power for 6 years, and we don't know anything about any friendship that Hunter and him may have had. But in 76, Hunter's original choice for his own undersheriff became sheriff, and then Bob Broaddus became sheriff, and Bob and Hunter became very close friends. And, Bob used to like to say, hey, I can either be the sheriff or your friend. It's kind of hard for me to be both.
You kept him out of a lot of trouble, though. He saved him a lot of ways. And what was Dick Keenis's? What did they call him?
Dick Dove and his deputies of love. And so the legacy there is really powerful. And I think that's what also interests Alex and I about this potential follow-up on Bob Broaddus, is that, we like to say, is although Hunter lost the battle, they won the war in a lot of ways, and that compassionate law enforcement, community-based law enforcement actually took root here. And then a lot of the things that Hunter was fighting for, it came to happen.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have mostly off-camera questions from this point on, but let me just ask you, where did you find the Oscar Zeta Acosta footage?
So that was in the same batch as the Fulton footage. One of the real tragic things is that we didn't have audio to about a 5-minute interview with Oscar. We didn't have audio for a 10-minute interview with Carol Whitmire. We didn't have audio for a 10-minute interview with Hunter's wife, Sandy. So there were a lot of limitations, and unfortunately, we never had Oscar really on any audio.
I was obsessed. I was convinced that if I kept looking, I was going to find some Oscar audio. And I was calling archives. I called Harvard. I was making them go through basements. And we just never could find any of that audio of Oscar.
Now, I will say, though, from a filmmaking standpoint, and I think that this translates to anything in the creative world, is that if you do create limitations on what you're doing, whether it's planned or unplanned. A lot of times that can be a powerful thing to make your creative project even more successful. Whenever there's a hindrance or a minus or a unavailability, it's on you to be creative about how to make it better. And so I think in a lot of ways, it was really unfortunate we didn't have Oscar's audio, because it would have been amazing to hear what he had to say. But that also forced us to bring in Oscar as a character and try to have our narrators explain a little bit who he was and then how important he was.
Can you discuss what you feel are the parallels politically from the film and what's happening today? And did Trump just steal from the Nixon playbook?
Oh, the Nixon playbook is an interesting twist to the question. I mean, I think in terms of the parallels between then and now, I mean, I think that it's almost self-explanatory. The police brutality, National Guard being called into protests,
civil unrest,
the environmental issues, civil unrest, heavy-handed law enforcement, and the need. I mean, it's like what Hunter says. As it is now, you just don't talk to a cop; they're the enemy. And that's true not only in Aspen, but everywhere in the United States. I mean,
but also against corrupt and greedy developers, which we have one in the White House.
Yeah, I think that we wanted to make the film timeless, so we never really wanted to say, draw some explicit links. But I think we did a good job, and the editors did a great job, Wills Nadarik and others, to use Nixon as kind of, he was Hunter's foil, but you can't look at Nixon and not think Trump sometimes.
I have to say, though, I think that Nixon was a lot smoother than Trump. It's just my opinion.
So there was another question. Also, speaking of developers, what came of the gentrification development issue in Aspen?
So I can speak to that. In the film, at the end, it shows that Joe Edwards and Dwight Shellman actually became county commissioners, and they did institute a lot of the zoning ideas that Hunter wanted, limiting the heights of development, creating green space around town, really tamping down development. At one point in time, you could build 40 houses on 40 acres. They changed the laws to say one house for 40 acres. Now, it was a double-edged sword, and unfortunately, by limiting the supply in such a manner, that caused the value and the demand to skyrocket. So, today we kind of sometimes poke fun at Aspen. We call it a glitter gulch. There's a lot of excess, and it's a land of the 1%ers. But I think that wasn't necessarily what they were going for, but it was just an unintended consequence of their actions.
And at the time, in 70, they were trying to prevent some 20 to 30,000 unit condo complexes from going into Aspen, and they actually did prevent that from happening.
That's the problem when you create you're in such a beautiful environment and you limit it, all of a sudden, the locals get squeezed out and other people move in. But, Aspen still has, especially off season, still has a great local crew, and there's great little towns down valley a bit, where people don't have to live downtown Aspen like DJ does.
Okay, our last question is from Robin. Let me move you over, Robin. All right, I see you on this side, Robin. Jump on in.
You're on mute.
The unmute is the lower left corner.
That it?
Yeah, that's it.
Got it.
Cool. Okay. So I just wanted to say how totally cool it was. And I actually dated Hunter, and I knew both Hunters, the evil, hilarious, hallucinogenic hustler, and this guy. And it was just wonderful to see this guy. So, and I thought you really pulled this narrative. I thought it was amazing. I unfortunately missed the beginning of it. I think someone sent me a link, and I'll watch it through from the beginning. I thought it started at 7, but I loved it. And I agree though, his cinematography is amazing, but also you fleshed out so many interesting people. I wish, and I'm looking forward to that one about the replacement sheriff, because he picked it up and he ran with it. It's great.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that the way to look at the future now is local government. Local government. Starve out the feds at every country. Starve them out.
Hunter said in 70 that he thought maybe the solution was for everybody to start living in city states again. So
there you go.
We're heading back there.
I know. It's like go back to the Middle Ages when we had like real guilds. But the point is that actually a good film. If you all guys haven't seen Tomorrow, see Tomorrow, because there's some really good thinking, and it's a feel good, smart film for smart people. A lot of people in solution, and it goes into local government big time at some point in it.
And I'll just mention, one of the quotes that Hunter used to like to say is, all politics is local. That was Tip O'Neill said that in 1947. And so I think that the idea about taking over your government, and Hunter gave us this powerful story and this message of empowerment, and get young people involved, encourage your friends to run for office, encourage your friends to take over the government. Let's create a future that we want to live in. And I think that's a really powerful story. Absolutely.
Can I just say that it got, a lot of people back in the day thought of anarcho-syndicalism with a dirty name, but actually anarcho-syndicalism in its pure sense is local government, period. Local government. Starve out all the corruption to the federal level. I'm done. Love you.
Thanks for appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Okay, we have one last thing off camera. Did you film at Owl Farm, and did you ever see Hemingway's horns?
We didn't film at Owl Farm. There's a lot of footage from there. A really interesting story is that Anita Thompson, Hunter's widow, recently gave the elk horns back to the Hemingway Museum in Sun Valley. And so a couple friends of ours and Anita drove these are these famous elk horns that Hunter had stolen from Ernest Hemingway in I believe the 50s or the 60s. And Anita, in an act of goodwill, gave them back to the Ernest Hemingway Museum, which was a really cool thing. So I think that those horns now are back in their proper home.
And DJ actually did do an early interview of Bob Broadus at Owl Farm, and visually it was beautiful, but the audio was absolutely crap and we couldn't use it.
Because there were squealing peacocks.
That's never been good.
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you for making this amazing film, and thank you for doing this on the eve of the election. I think that
Great
this
distraction.
will give us yeah. And if anyone out there still hasn't voted, please make sure you do so tomorrow. Katherine, thank you so much for moderating. It was really nice to have you jump into the mix with us.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for curating it.
And thank you, Alex. This was really wonderful, top notch. And thank you, Alex Buysse. And we can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Yep, you're on the hook, Alex.
Thanks.
We're expecting great things.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mimi.
guys.
Night,
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Good to meet you guys.
Good night, everyone.
Good one. Pray for tomorrow.